Yo, what's going on YouTube? I hope you guys are having yourselves a fantastic day. In today's video, we are going to be making, oh my god, there's a fat spider on my mic right now. Hold up. As I was trying to say, in today's video, we're going to be making the Louis Vuitton Nike Air Force 1s by Virgil. This is also the first pair of shoes I made without following a tutorial. When I made my Jordan 1s from a previous video, if you guys want to go check that out, you guys can scroll back a few videos. I pretty much just followed a tutorial by Aussie Arts, but this one, I wanted to challenge myself and try to figure it out on my own, using the skills that I've learned so far in my Blender journey. I've always enjoyed looking at high fashion and streetwear a little bit, although I never really spend the money on it. I always found it fascinating and enjoy the creativity and freedom that comes with these designers. But anyways, I started with the bottom of the shoe, bringing in a circle and just extruding some of the vertices out to kind of follow this pattern that's going on the bottom. So as you can see with all these circles, we're just going to keep selecting the outer vertices and duplicating them and then scaling them up to fit the bigger circles for each, iteration. Then we're going to get rid of the vertices that we don't need by selecting them and hitting X. And then actually some of the circles are actually combined together. So we're going to select two vertices on each side and then hit F to create a face to connect them together. And then after the circles, we're just going to take some vertices from the circle and extrude them out to follow these lines that are all around the shoe. Just extruding the vertices every once in a while. Now for this big sort of indentation where the Nike logo is going to go, you're just going to want to select all the vertices that follow the outside of that shape and then extrude them and then scale them in a little bit with S, extrude them with the E key, and then once it gets lined up with kind of that first angle, then you're just going to want to hit G and then move it up the Z axis a little bit to give it that full indentation, and then hit F to create that face on the inside of it. Now it's time to make the Nike logo on the bottom, and so we're just going to bring in a brand new plane and kind of lining it up in the general idea, but it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to add a solidify modifier to it at some point. So we're just going to bring in the plane, line it up appropriately, and then extrude the vertices and follow the Nike logo. Using R to rotate and G to grab the vertices to move it around. I forgot to mention when I added in the plane for the Nike logo, I added it in when I was in edit mode for the bottom of the shoe, so it's still all one mesh. Now if you have two different meshes, one with the Nike logo on it and then one of the bottom of the shoe, you can just select both of them and then hit Ctrl J to make it one. Either way works, but once I finished the logo, I just lined it up as best as possible, closest to the bottom of the shoe, and then added the solidify modifier to it to give it a little bit of depth. And initially I wasn't happy kind of how far the Nike logo was sticking out, so I just went back into edit mode, hitting tab, selecting all the Nike vertices, and then hitting G to move the Nike logo vertices only up and down to kind of get the extrusion that I wanted. Then you're going to want to right click the sole of the shoe and hit shade smooth. You could do this earlier as well, I just kind of forgot to do it until later. And then go down to the little green triangle to the right called object data properties and turn on auto smooth, and you can adjust that a little bit if you want it a little bit smoother or a little bit less. Kind of just depends on what you prefer. Alright, now next up is to add like these like cylinder, circle, half circle sort of things in between all of our little notches there, whatever you want to call them. Now there's multiple ways to do this. I initially tried to add a curve and do it that way, but the whole curve ordeal is still kind of challenging for me, so I kind of failed with that, and then I ended up just doing it a little bit of a harder way, maybe not harder but more tedious way, by just adding in a cylinder and then extruding all of the points pretty much around where they needed to go Definitely takes a little bit longer than doing it the curved way, but again, I was having a lot of issues with that and I just kind of wanted to move on from that point, so the cylinder strategy worked just fine. So we just rotated the cylinder kind of where it needed to fit, selected it, moved it up on the Z-axis to fit inside of our little slots there, and then just selected all the vertices on the outside, hit E to extrude them, rotate them around the circle, and that's how we got it to fit. Alrighty, and you should get something that looks like this. Now our bottom sole is pretty much almost all complete, and the last step we're going to do is we're going to select the outer vertices of the entire sole, duplicate them with Shift D, and then while they're all still selected, hit P to separate by selection. And then basically we're gonna make one big face just to fill in the bottom gaps of the sole, and that'll complete the whole bottom section or the lower section of the sole. Alright, at this point you should get something that looks like this. All the gaps are kind of filled in there, and it's not hollow in between the cylinders and the other part of the sole. And so now we're going to hit Shift A and add in a curve. It'll be the NURBS path, or I think it's just called the path option. We're going to pretty much line that up in the middle of our sole, both on the Z axis and the Y axis for me. And basically what this is for is we're going to use this to get that curved look at the bottom of the sole. I mean, the sole isn't completely flat, as you'll be able to see in our reference image, so we'll be able to get a nice little curve, which makes it look more realistic. Once you get the path all lined up, you're going to select your sole and then add the curve modifier to it, and then you're going to go ahead and use the dropper from the curve modifier, I think it's just said curve, and go ahead and select the pathway that you made. Now I'm not sure why sometimes when I do the curve modifier that it has like this offset whenever I apply it, but it's alright. You can just select it and drag it forward and just realign it up, and it'll be alright. If anybody knows why it does this, just let me know in the comments below. It would be greatly appreciated. Now we can select our curve pathway and move it up and down on the Z axis to get that curve look. If you need to subdivide it, you can select 2 points, right click and hit subdivide to get another point in, just to make the curve look a little bit smoother. Alright, that's looking pretty solid. So let's hop into trying to do the midsole. In order to do that, we're going to create a new mesh, bring in a plane. We're going to rotate the plane 90 degrees along the x-axis. Then we're going to hop into x-ray mode, hitting Alt-Z, just so we can see our reference image in the background and line it up properly. And we're going to scale down the plane using S, and then just like the other things, we're going to extrude all our vertices in order to fit kind of that midsole area. So then you're going to hit E, then X to extrude along the x-axis. Keep it pretty straight for now, and then just go along and shape the midsole best as possible. And then you're just going to keep going all the way around the entire shoe to the other side, and just repeat the steps, lining it up with your reference image. Once you get everything lined up from the side, then you just want to go around and line everything up with the bottom of the sole. You could add loop cuts in with Control R to add more vertices, just so you can get more of that roundish look if you need to. And then next up, we're going to do like the toe box leather. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but we're going to call it the toe box leather. Or I guess it would be on the side of the toe box. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. So if you wanted to, you could keep it all one mesh and just extrude the vertices out from what we just did, but I like to keep it separate. So what I did was just copied all the vertices at the bottom of the toe box leather here, toe box side leather, duplicated it with Shift D, then while all the vertices are still selected, hit P to separate by selection, and that way your side toe box leather and your midsole will be lined up without having to bring in a new plane and then do all the manual lining up again. Also, don't be afraid to delete kind of what you're going with and restart just to make things look a little bit nicer. I know that's kind of obvious, but there's been times where I just try to fix something that's wrong and it just wastes more time instead of just restarting and doing it right another time. If you wanted to, you could select that. If you wanted to, you could select that whole section of the mesh, duplicate it, then bring it along the y-axis to the other side, hit Control M and flip it, and then just attach it to the vertices that you already have going on over there. But I just decided to freestyle it again to have a little bit more practice. Either way works though. The other way saves more time, and it's what I did with the Jordan 1s. You also might get a little bit more of a consistent result doing it that way as well. So this is kind of what it's going to look like here, and it's time to kind of like bring the leather in, because obviously on a shoe it's more rounded towards the inside of it. Now also, if you notice, our sole has like this lip at the bottom of it. Don't worry, we're going to fix that later. So we're going to select all the vertices at the top of the toe box side leather, and then we're going to hit S to scale them in to kind of give it that curve, like roundish kind of look. So it's going to fit around the actual toe box. And then you just kind of want to look around your references and make sure everything is lined up. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but the more it fits with your reference image, the more it's going to look appropriate. As you start adding more pieces in, sometimes it doesn't quite line up exactly to it, and that's okay, but lining it up with the reference image is going to help give you the best result possible. And now we're going to move on to the back middle leather, and we're just going to be following the same steps. So we're going to select our midsole again, select the vertices that line up with the back leather, hit Shift D to duplicate, and then while all the vertices are still selected, you're going to hit P to separate by selection, and then we're just going to extrude the vertices multiple times until we get the shape that we need for the back leather. It's the same steps that we just did in the toe box side leather. Alright, so now our shoe is coming together pretty nicely. It's actually starting to look like a shoe at this point. Now, the sharpness on the sole was really bothering me at this point, and so I'm going to show you guys how I fixed it real quick. You're just going to select the sole, select the bottom vertices, like all the way around. You can just click one vertice, then hit Shift Alt, and then click one next to it, and it should select all the vertices around it. And then once you have all the vertices selected at the bottom, you're going to want to hit Control B to bevel it out. You can either use the mouse wheel to scroll to add like multiple loop cuts essentially, and then you could also drag the mouse out or like around. I don't really know how to explain it. You just drag the mouse and it'll kind of bevel that whole area out a little bit. So it'll go from really sharp to kind of a rounder edge, which is exactly what we need. And it went from looking kind of like a horse hoof on the bottom of the shoe to actually what the Air Forces look like. And then I personally just had to clean up a little bit of the mess that I created here. Not only were some of the cylinders too long and were now protruding once I beveled the sole inwards, I also forgot to combine like the filler sole with our outer sole, so that's why it's like protruding out the side. So just had to hit tab on those, go into edit mode, and then just bring them back into the inside to where you couldn't see them. Not a big deal, but just a little bit sloppy. Now we're gonna make the leather that the shoelaces come through. Again, this is just the same steps. We're gonna bring in a plane, rotate it properly, and just follow our reference image, extruding the vertices and hitting G to move them around. Now, one thing I forgot to explain when I was making the back mid leather was how to make these circles that the laces are going to come through. So you're going to need 8 vertices total, 9 if you count the center one, or 4 faces. Then in edit mode, you're going to go to the faces and select all 4, then hit I to bring them in. And then you're going to select the inside 8 vertices and then right click into the loop tools, which you have to turn on in the settings, and then you're going to just switch into a circle. Now we're just going to mess around with proportional editing, again just to line up with our front reference and our side reference. And then once we got that where we like it, we're just going to select all the vertices and hit Shift D and bring it over to the other side. Then we're going to hit Control M and then flip it on the Y axis or whatever axis you have going that way. Once we got the eyelets and the toe box side leather all lined up somewhat decently, it was time to move on to the toe box itself. So we're going to go ahead and hit Shift A and add in a surface, a NURB surface. And it already gives us kind of a nice curve to work with, so you don't have to do anything like too crazy with like planes. You could do it that way too though if you wanted to. But you're going to notice with the NURB surface that when you hit tab into edit mode, the way that you're gonna move things around is a lot differently. It's kind of like a lattice. So you're just gonna pull it around and kind of fill in that toe box area best as possible, and then eventually you're gonna convert it to a mesh by going up to the object tab up at the top and then convert to mesh. Alrighty, I kind of forgot to record like adjusting the mesh part of the toe box, but you're just going to drag it around until it fits in there properly and then add the solidify modifier to it. And then moving forward, we're going to fill in the little space in between the toe box side leather and the middle back leather. And this is pretty much just going to be the same steps that we were doing before. Bring in a plane, extrude out, you guys know the ordeal. Just going to let you guys chill out to the music for this part.